Storytelling is about creating pictures in people's heads, touching people emotionally. People will forget what you say to them. People will forget what you do for them. People will never forget the way you make them feel. And if you're going to touch people emotionally, you've got to tell beautiful stories as well.
Quality and the brand delivery needs to be right on point before you start doing any kind of storytelling. Not having a consumer come to you is fine, but having a consumer come to you and leave the worst thing that you can do with your brand.
The same exact product can be told in different ways. That's what the content creators are doing nowadays, right? Influencers are doing that way. But just stick to your story and have your story and grow on it, whether it's fiction or real. Just be true to that.
Hello everyone, I'm with Echelon, sheslays. My name is Chamindri Pilimatalauwe and I myself is a practicing marketer and also a storyteller. I'm so psyched up today because I have three amazing people who are also great storytellers here joining me to talk about building brands through storytelling. I have Kavi Rajapaksha here with me, who is the CMO of Sunshine Holdings. I also have Manjarie Tissera, who is the co-founder and deputy chairman of Juniper Group. I also have Shalin Balasuriya, who is the co-founder of Ceylon. Welcome to you all. Steve Jobs said that the most powerful person in this world is a storyteller. In a certain way, it is very true because people forget facts, but they remember stories. In this era called the Great Screen Age, where attention span is shrinking and there is information overload, how do we as brands tell stories in a way that we are remembered? Let's discuss. My first question goes to Kavi Rajapaksha. When you talk about the ascendancy of storytelling, what is driving this and what are the key communication tools in doing this?
I actually don't know if there's an ascension, because if you talk like way back when there was cave pictures, like, you know, people really trying to figure out what that meant, to now when you have commercials where you really look at it and think, what are they trying to say? I don't know if there's ascension, but definitely there's a lot of tools that you can use for storytelling. That is definitely like growth there. But I agree with you on a lot of points that you said. People don't really remember facts. I mean, we all know that decision making happens like with emotional intelligence first, where you emotionally are inclined towards something before you actually logically reason it out, right? And a story is the best way to get into that washing machine of the brain where you really go around that emotional, like, you know, journey. So for me, if we are to agree on the premise, there is essential in terms of tools and touch points for storytelling. I believe the content creators and storytellers of today have it both easy and difficult, because it's easy because different people like different tool sets and you can use these different tool sets to get to them. But which tools to really get into? Where do you really prioritize? Where do you really take a step back is a question that you have to ask yourself, because everything keeps on changing all the time. So short answer is ascension, questionable. Tools, touch points for storytelling, yes.
Can I just add something onto that? I think the great thing about today and how things have changed dramatically is that anyone can have a platform now. If you go back 20 years when I started in this whole marketing game, if you needed to get a lot of attention, you needed to get the prime time slot.
Yeah.
Your 15 or 30 second, you're paying $200,000 even then to get that, right? Now it's social media is such an equalizer. Some kid sitting in his bedroom in Maharagama across TikTok is going to get that kind of coverage, right? So everyone has a voice, which is a great equalizer, which is a great thing for smaller brands as well. Great for startups, great for even brands like us when we go international, because you don't have to go in with those $billion budgets anymore. So like she said, it's those tools and the accessibility of those tools that have really changed the game.
Following up on that question, I'd direct the next question to you. You're talking predominantly to women, and your staff is also predominantly women. Beautiful women. How important is authenticity in storytelling for you? And can you just create brand stories like that?
See, that's the other side of it, right? It's yes, platforms are easily accessible. Also, the big thing is information is easily accessible, right? And all of us are fighting for attention. And the thing about people now is, yes, you get their attention. When you get their attention, they want to know, oh, what is this story you're telling me, and is it true? And if they doubt it, just get on and check. So that's why the stories we tell has to be steeped in authenticity. There is creative license you can take above it, like what we do. Look, for example, Ceylon, the story we tell is Ayurveda as practiced in the grand palaces. Authentic story. There have been kings and queens who are great Ayurveda practitioners. The palaces had the best ingredients, the best practitioners. Therefore, they had the best Ayurveda, luxurious, all that. The luxury we portray, though, is much higher than the level of luxury that Sri Lanka had, because we were a poor kingdom, or we had poorer kingdoms and much less ornate than other kingdoms from around the world. But in order to tell the story in a way that it resonates with today's audience, the pictures we draw up in people's minds, the kind of artworks we use, the way we tell the story is, of course, there is some puffery in that, there is some creative license in that, but the authenticity of the story remains the same. Very much like our products. The authenticity in the formulation, they are still Ayurvedic, they are still natural, but on the delivery, we bring the modern trappings in to make it feel comfortable, make it smell good, so on and so forth. So authenticity, very important because of the access of information, but creative license is also important because, again, it's all storytelling is about creating pictures in people's heads. Touching people emotionally. This is famous Maya Angelou quote that I've developed all our marketing on and our brands on. People will forget what you say to them. People will forget what you do for them. People will never forget the way you make them feel. And if you're going to touch people emotionally, you've got to tell beautiful stories as well. So, yeah.
To add on to that, you can have the story, but there is a part of fiction that you can bring to. For example, our brand, we have a character called Jupiter Sebastian. He's 30,007 years old. So he's like a wise man. And he has now selected to live in Kurunegala. So we have kind of hired him as a consultant. So he's saying the stories of the facts and figures that we have about Kurunegala and our research. But so it's fiction. The character is fiction. But the way he's saying it is more of a story. So currently he has a pet. It's an owl called Night Sky. So whenever we take pictures like drone footage and things like that, we give credit to that owl. So we are doing the whole fiction part, but with the actual authentic information with it. So that combination sometimes reaches a different level because end of the day, like there's so much of information, there's so much of fear, there's so much of chaos, and sometimes a little fiction can bring that story all together. So I would say you can build stories, you can build a story, but the authenticity lies on like your information, because your story is not going to be the same as their story, right? So
can I ask a question from Shalin?
Yes.
Because I've always debated this in my head. I think an MBA thesis on Ceylon way back then, I think. So when you're creating the brand, right, people say you have to stay relevant, but people also say that you have to break the clutter and be aspirational. In your sphere, you need to be aspirational, but also relevant because Sri Lanka is not a first world country. How did you kind of go through that and then come into this current way of marketing and the storytelling that you do right now?
See, what was interesting in this point is, look, firstly, we had to take Ayurveda, which was a poor man's medicine, and make it high-end for Sri Lanka, let's say. So that was the first challenge. And this whole story we did around Ayurveda as practiced in the grand palaces helped establish that. And through associations, events, putting the brand in the right place, we created a positioning for it, including where we sold. So that was the first part, and we started building. As we built in the first few years of it, tourism became a big part of our sale. So much so 70% of our sale came from tourism. Then comes COVID. Tourism goes to zero. So we're sitting at home wondering, what are we going to do? That's when we really started taking Ceylon beyond Colombo. I'm talking in a Sri Lankan sense. Yes, things are happening overseas, but we started taking it out of Colombo, which meant communicating in Sinhala, communicating in Tamil. A lot of experts told us don't do it. It's going to ruin the brand. You can't be an aspirational brand and communicate this way. But we did. We managed to segment. That's another great thing about your socials, that you can give
Segment
different
target,
messages to
that's for
different
sure.
people. Everyone
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily need to see it. So it's a delicate balance of being able to communicate in these different languages and in different ways. But it can be done. As long as you keep the brand experience the same, you can tweak the communications because you can customize it now.
I have a question. So the word spa, when you go out of Colombo, it's a very controversial word. How did you find that? What were the challenges and how did you kind of vote it?
Interesting. So something extraordinary happened recently, which really brought light to this as well. So when we started Ceylon, people didn't even want to work in the store. ගෙදර කට්ටියට කියන්න බෑ spa කියලා.
Wow.
So the larger company was Janet. They wanted an ID that said Janet on it.
Janet.
So even the
Right.
people that worked in the stores.
Wouldn't have thought of that.
Last
right?
week, someone sent me A-level business studies paper that had a Ceylon case study on it.
Wow.
At that point, I thought, wow, how far we've come.
Yes.
That now people didn't want to work for us at one stage because of spa was, and this is on an A-level paper in Sinhala, right? Now people working in other parts of the company also say spa salon. People come into our stores and take pictures and say, I'm at Spa Salon. So social culturally, how a brand can have impact on even a word is amazing. And it's something we're very, very proud of.
Yeah.
A story
Kudos.
told well.
Yeah, kudos.
I have the next question for Manjarie. A brand that started in Kurunegala, mostly what people would do is something like real estate. They'll start in Colombo and then try to expand. How did you manage to take this brand and how is storytelling relevant to you? You touched on it with certain elements that was closer to the brand, but
so the
that.
reason we actually picked Kurunegala was 99% research based. So one thing we do as a company is a large amount of our budget goes for our research unit, which is now named as Juniplus. So our research actually goes into looking at traffic maps, heat maps. Like we invest quite a large sum there. So Kurunegala, 8 years ago, when we looked at it, we realized there is a plan for Central Expressway. And that will give a little bit more return than Colombo. Colombo also affordability, like if your ticket size is like 5 million, what can you really buy in Colombo, right? So we looked at, okay, if someone invests like 2-3 million with us or anywhere, where can they kind of see a doubling in few years? And for that, infrastructure developments really play a huge role, right? So transit-oriented developments take like any district or any area and it can give a sudden boom. But the catch is, to do that, you have to have an existing structure in that city. You have to have people. There has to be some kind of, school base, a medical base. You can't just artificially bring like a highway or something like that to an area which is not humans are living there. So when you actually bring some infrastructure to an existing city, which are actually called legacy cities, so when you bring the infrastructure in, you see a boom. Suddenly the people in the district, they see, okay, what's going on? We need to grab this opportunity. And surrounding areas, like in Kurunegala's case, you get Nigambo, you get Putlam, you get Kandy, you get Colombo. So all these areas, they were looking at, okay, what can we do? And Colombo being like, a little kind of always like checking for new opportunities, they saw this and they thought, okay, why not? Let's give it a try. And we invested actually before the highway even started. As a company, we marked all the toll booths. So later we handed over those areas and we kept looking where the highway is going. So that is our story. So we went with the highway, but we actually studied what was the living condition in Kurunegala, what kind of a people, what kind of a base is there, and will this actually give a proper effect, a good effect on it?
And how did you kind of, through storytelling, get people to actually come invest in these properties?
So the story was, back then it was quite easy for us to look at like, okay, the ticket size is 1 million, 10 million, 20 million, or 5 million. And where will you put it? So as a company, our story was, we didn't look at other real estate companies, but we looked at financial tools. Same money, if you put it on a FD or in the market or in gold or whatever, where will you place it? So we based our story on an investment ground and a research-based investment ground.
Kavi, you are a consumer goods marketer. There are many stakeholders in your supply chain. How do you align everybody to one story? Or is there one story?
Yeah, the mother of all questions. So I think the easiest answer I could give you, or the most sought after billboarded answer I can give you, is that we have a purpose and we drive towards it. But will I be saying the truth? I would say no. When you have different departments, depending on the culture of the company, if they've been siloed, if they've been not made to work together, then different departments have different interests, because the balance scorecard, the KPIs would reflect different things. But if they haven't been told why those balance scorecards or factors or KPIs are what they are, and how in the big picture they play a role, getting things done, being agile, and actually matching your brand's promise is really going to be a massive issue. See, supply chain would want to do their own kind of innovations. Marketing would be looking at different research and wanting to do their own things. Finance will be looking at all A&P and other costs as costs and not investments, because they've not been brought into the same board. They're not on the same page. For me, storytelling is so much more important internally, where we gather everybody together and just have these very nice cross-functional chats where we really align ourselves and say, okay, in a few years, this is where this brand is going to go. And for that, this is what we need to do. This is where our gaps are. This is where we are really good at. And this is what our plan is. And you will play a key role. And you are going to be supporting in this. But here is where you can shine. And so you need to also give people what is in it for me. The brand story is all the more, important. But these are people driving a brand story forward. So yes, amazing to have a brand promise out there. But if you can't deliver that, I always say it's just going to be unauthentic. Like he said, you're not going to have really any feel to the brand, because you're just going to be disappointed the very first time you try it out. But for that, if the people internally are not bought into the story, are not believing in what they're doing, is going to add to the bigger picture, it's really not going to go anywhere. It will just be a blip. So for me, it's all about bringing people together into one single story. So everybody knows the part I play and where it's going to lead me and my brand.
So following on that, you have a brand like Zesta, a brand like Vatawala, a brand like Rankahata, a brand like D&T. So many different brands talking to different audiences, and obviously different people managing these. How challenging is that, or how do you because it's multiple brands you're working
Yep.
with. One moment you're in this, one moment you're in the other one. How do you keep all the stories synced but not synced?
Yeah, you can't have them synced, but at the same time, it's the same team in the company who's also working on it, because if you look at the cross-functional, team, it's the same. So for me, the biggest challenge I would say is to have 3 T brands, all leading the 3 tiers, right? Vatawala is leading all of Sri Lanka, and Zesta is leading premium market, and Rankahata is leading the value for money market. So in all 3 aspects, I can't compromise one brand when I build the other, because there's easily going to be cannibalizing. So like building on the Zesta indulgence story, be it the Vatawala quality freshness story, or Rankahata to be this empathetic thing, as a storyteller, it's a little difficult to change my lens, and I must also be humanly, because I'm human, I must be bringing in certain aspects of this brand to that as well. But a lot of it remains the same. The essence of storytelling, essence of brand building across is more or less the same, and you just package it differently for each brand. So there is concession, but that's what also makes it, the challenge is what also makes it interesting, and like, you know, you're not bored looking at one single brand. There's different set of challenges, different set of opportunities for each brand, and the story you tell is different. For me, it's a amazing thing to get to office to. But like I said, the good thing is that the key aspects, the fundamentals of storytelling across brands doesn't change. The people who are managing it doesn't change. So it's a little bit of wrapping it differently for each brand, but it's a challenge I've come to love.
We have a similar situation. So we run 3 brands: Ceylon, which is at the higher end. Janet, which is at the mass market end, Essence, which is in the middle. So again, we have a larger marketing team, but I've separated the teams, but they'll all sit together, exchange ideas certain times as well. What we do is ensure that there is always a check of everything that goes in, where any idea or any story is checked at the end. Does it hit the brand pillars? So when even I get involved, sometimes you cross the border a little bit and the brand pillars bring you back. So treating your brand, even as a founder, treating your brand like an entity of its own and saying, am I being authentic to the brand, is an important thing, especially when you're running multiple brands. Because it's hard not to put yourself in it. So that check really helps.
And also the competition in between these brands really helps, the internal competition. As long as you keep them in line, but also foster good, friendly competition, it's the best thing that you can do.
Right now, our guys, I know there are 2 brands of ours on a daily basis fighting for followers who's going to be the largest beauty brand on YouTube, right? So it's one day it's Ceylon, the next day it's Janet, and they're going at each other. I love it.
Yeah. All the best for the
I think
business, right?
this is where the basics of branding also comes, where you have that checklist. Checking, is it right by my consumer? Is it right by my brand? And is it right by what the company promises to do? The next question is for you, Manjarie. You're talking about real estate. That is what you're selling. What is the woman's role in this? How do you tell stories to women here?
If you are a married couple, we've seen this for the last 8 years, the decision is 99.9% of the time made by the female. 100. I mean, I wish to say 100%.
Is this research, or are you saying
this is forever?
Shalin's like, what?
Okay, test it. Okay, I think if you want to open a FD, you would just go and speak to your RM and say, Mashang, or whatever, I need to put 10 million or whatever. But the moment you want to buy a piece of land or real estate or an apartment or a villa or whatever, that conversation goes beyond your limit, and you go home and just say, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's like a spark that okay, I must get involved. So even if it is Kurunagala residents or Colombo residents that go with us to see the lands, 99.9% of the time, the female looks at a complete different thing, and she would either like it or need some kind of an improvement or not like it. And that direct answer actually just comes from the female. So even the husband would say, this is done, let's go see it. The female will go with him, obviously, and say, why don't we get 2 blocks? Or why don't we shift it to the paddy view or the lake view or something that the male figure will not look at. So it's quite important. The advertisements we do or the content we do may attract the male first, and he will contact us and say, I'm kind of interested. But the land plot selection, if I can say 100%, it's the female.
Wow, interesting.
Interestingly, this is also the case in life insurance,
Yes.
right? A lot of life insurance marketing is directed at the male because it has been the norm. But when you actually look at it, they make the decision together. When I say together, the female has a bigger role in the decision-making process. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, technically a decision can make or break based on what you say.
So in cosmetics, it's the other way around.
Oh.
Women buy for the men. Not at the high end, but at the mass end.
Oh, yes.
Right.
So,
is it like gifts and stuff?
No. So Akkage face wash එක ගන්න, අම්මගේ face wash එක ගන්න, then the mother sees or the sister sees or the wife sees and says, I'm going to buy something for the guy.
Oh,
This is at the
right.
entry level. Yeah.
Wow.
At a higher level, it changes.
Of course.
So a lot of the time,
Interesting.
even for men's products, we'll talk to women at that end to buy for the guy.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Paradigm shift.
and most of the time, he usually buys it under her name also. That's I don't know. Maybe out of love or something. There's like something towards that. But most of the time that happens.
See, this is the interesting thing that Byron Sharp talks about, right? Like we always segment and we target. But actually, do we really know by targeting and segmenting, are we really letting go of the core decision maker, right?
Yeah.
So the wider you cast the net, the more probable you are to kind of get who you want to get. So it's a really good, debate to
Absolutely.
have.
And this also brings into question, do you really go look at your entire customer journey, and how do you tell stories to actually talk to those different customers? Because in your case, the man comes first and then the woman.
Yeah.
Do you tell stories to appeal to both in different ways? Obviously, you can't talk to everybody.
Yes.
But still, how do you kind of really...
Absolutely. I mean, the journey, most of the time, if it is a married couple, I wouldn't say all the time the man is the one who contacts us. But then the content is kind of focused to that group. And then it shifts to a physical meeting with our sales team, then the visits. Then once you purchase, post-marketing after purchasing is focused towards that female who also made the decision, for her to feel good that she made the right decision. And she would usually ask for updates and the new newsletter, or is there a new product coming? Is there a new land? Where's your next destination? That kind of questions come from that. So it's like a weird loop that we work with, which it took us quite a lot of time to understand, that at least a year, I would say. But it's really interesting. And when there are kids involved, and when there are more family
That's the factor,
involved,
yes.
when there are grandparents involved, again, everything comes to play, because it's real estate. And even if the ticket size is 5 million and most of the watches are over that, but still, when it comes to that investment decision, everyone wants to be part of it. Everyone wants to select, be in the process, wants to visit the place. Everything comes to play.
Yeah. I mean, same with tea, right? How many guys do we know who can make a killer cup of tea? Right? I mean, traditionally, it's a woman of the house supposed to make good tea. But right now, what we see is the children in the household buy one brand, the mother wants one brand, and the father wants one brand. And sometimes the mother doesn't get her way because the father likes certain brand of tea. And the teacup is actually, dominated by the father's choice. So
I personally vouch for that.
Exactly. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing. So, I mean, all these paradigms are now coming into real question, because you never know. Things have really changed. Or maybe they were the same, but we've not understood them to be that.
Now you're probably looking at it more, right?
More right. Yeah, exactly.
Like the way you notice that, they're using the mother's or sister's product.
But the nice thing is, we've always seen that the boyfriends, the husbands, the siblings using it. But as marketer, we've not done something, but you picked up that. So it's a,
Make it a little larger.
No, I think in every industry, there are the gatekeepers, then there are the decision makers, and sometimes there's something happens that in the middle as well. Even in corporate selling, for instance, right? There are lots of gatekeepers, from secretaries to HR people to all that. And then the decision makers, who are possibly CEOs, managers. When we do marketing for corporate gifting, we'll hit both segments in different ways. That whole journey, understanding the decision-making process, really makes a change in the way you do market. And I think that's what's happening to marketing now. Our marketing has become more qualitative than quantitative. Also, the new media has allowed that as well, where you can segment far better, but also understand behavior. So we've come to an era where you're really looking at behavior, and because there's data on behavior as well. So interesting times.
On following up on that, what you said, Shalin, I think this question is to all of you all. What does it mean to be a storyteller in a world where AI, smartphones, and closed platforms are your main distribution mediums? And how do you really leverage on this?
Look, I think AI is fantastic as a starting point. And I think anytime you talk about AI or tech, you have to say the word "as of now," right? As of now, today's date, AI is a really good starting point, really good brainstorming point, really good initial artwork kind of point just to get your ideas in place. It can save you anything from days to months to get there to start with. You wouldn't want to rely on AI right now as your end product. Because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, storytelling is about creating pictures in people's heads, about emotionally activating people.
Yeah.
AI is not good at emotion yet. So till such time, we need people who understand emotion, people who understand how to tell stories, tonality, how you can draw those pictures up, what are the emotional points of it, how to accentuate those points. Those coming together is what brings the humanity into it. So use AI, but don't lose people yet.
Yeah. So for me, AI, I stand by exactly what you said. The only little bit that I would add on is the more creativity there is in the world, the more imagination there is in the world, the better it is, right? So for me, the ascension of AI as it now has enabled people to really kind of get a fraction or a nice, I wouldn't say a mirror image, but an idea of what they've imagined onto a paper or a screen, which makes it more easier for us to communicate, because I might have an idea in my head, but if I'm not good at drawing or if I'm not good at really articulating that, how do I really get across to somebody, right? For me, in especially just storytelling, right? If you look at leave out data and everything out, right? For me, the biggest step there is for those who are unable to articulate it, AI has enabled to really create an initial version 1 of that idea in their minds. And I feel like it's a really good platform to get your design out, your idea design out, and then work on it. Like he said, the human aspect, I don't think no matter how big machines and AI kind of get, I personally believe that humans will always remain superior because of the empathy and the emotions that we have. But if there is a way that machines can, of course, live up to it, then I'll be proven wrong. But right now, I feel it's a really good first step towards getting that story, that idea out into the world.
Okay, so something I've been telling my designers, like from the day after ChatGPT came out and all Midjourney and all that came out, I got my designers and creative guys and said, look, here's the deal. If you are going to be a machine operator, like every other revolution in the world, you will get replaced.
Yep.
If you're a Photoshop operator, Illustrator operator, you're going to get replaced. You need to be a creator. So we are living in a world where creators will still remain.
Exactly.
But if you're just a machine operator who just does what you're told to do, you're in trouble.
I would say, just add on to it, just because another brand is doing it, they have the same graphics going on, the content going on, you don't need to do it. And your content need to resonate with what you really want to put it out. And of course, you can use AI to kind of clean things up, maybe to even analyze things up. That, humanly at a discussion, we might not find correlations of this to that. So you can use data for things like that. You can use ChatGPT to write certain captions and whatever, but it cannot be the creator. It has to be handled. It has to be handled like a, vehicle. You still have to kind of drive and you have to know where you're going. And you can absolutely use it, but you shouldn't enslave. And also you shouldn't do it just because the second or the third brand is doing it. And that's kind of the trend, unless that's your game plan all along.
That's where clarity and leadership also plays a role, right? Because you have salespeople who come and say, this brand is doing that. Yeah. And then management will look and say, look, these guys are cutting costs by doing ABC things. But you should know what your premise is, and you should know what fits your brand. And like you said, if you know where you're going, then you need to stand by what is right for your brand. You can't be doing everything that that is out there in the world.
Yeah, and lose yourself in the process.
In that.
Yeah. One question I want to ask is, because most of you all spoke about women in decision making in terms of a consumer. How important is women on our side, or rather on the brand side, in terms of really taking brands forward, especially that these brands talk to women and actually address in different ways? For an example, yours is not the direct consumer, but there is a part that a woman plays. How important is women in leadership roles or or in brand roles to kind of really address these?
If I were to take first pick at this, right, I have a rather, I won't say controversial view, but I would say this. I've always believed in nurturing female leaders. I've been a massive cheerleader and I've been always doing that my whole life. But if I had the option of, let's say, one spot where I have a male and a female who are equally capable, then picking the female is not doing something wrong by the guy, because you are giving that limelight to the talent and not the gender. What most companies tend to do today because of DEI is they tend to kind of amp up the female quota and promote people just because they are women. And that's the biggest a thing that you can do to a woman. It's so unfair because you might be setting them up for failure if they're not ready for it, and the company might not be ready for that also. So for me, having females or males who are right for the top, who are talented, is what's important. That's where equality comes in, because if you're always going to be promoting a female over a male just because she's female, she's going to feel like, you know what, I got so far just because I'm a woman, not because I deserve to be here. So that's the biggest sin you can do to a woman's career. So there, I think there's enough and more research to show that having diversity is a way to go, but it shouldn't be done just for the sake of doing it, is my view.
Completely agree. I will say is there are certain things men are good at. There are certain things that women are good at. For instance, I believe, or we've come to realize, the emotional intelligence wise, on average, women are better than men. We have to accept that, right? Therefore, when you're looking at marketing to other women and understanding their inner voice, men haven't understood women for thousands of years. Right? So don't expect them to do it just because they're a great marketer. So having women in the team really does help. So a bulk of my team are females, and it does help. And over time, we've got used to understanding the emotional edge of how to communicate effectively with women. But the average marketer guy does not know that. It takes a while. But a woman walking into that role, the emotional intelligence that women do have because of the way they think compared to where a man thinks, in the cosmetics beauty industry, it helps.
Completely agree. I think women bring a different aspect also, a bit of empathy and more responsibility. So if you give the brand guideline to a female, it's like, my baby, no, we can't do this, we can do that. So you can see that clearly. But absolutely empowering them is important, guiding them is important, and you have to give equal opportunity to people who bring the ideas and really go along with it, right? Because you can bring an idea, but operationally, how is that going to work? So in our company, one of the biggest tasks, the legal aspect, the finance aspect, is actually handled by females, and there is a lot of responsibility there. But overall, the culture should be that men, women should just feel free to say what they want and bring an idea and execute it, and bring the project and say, this was successful, went against your whatever ideas, but we did it and this was good. So let's kind of do more of this kind of thing. So that, I think, is the empowerment, that you put everyone together and be able to work together.
Emotional quotient, yes. I think IQ is subjective to the individual. But from an adversity quotient point of view, I think women are superior because of the physiological, challenges they go through. And in terms of a grit factor, I think having a woman at the helm in that way, research shows, doesn't prove that a man can't do it, but women have shown to be much more, better at getting through adversity simply because of the biological, factors. So in that way, having females running a ship or having more females during turbulent times is definitely going to be a very, very good thing to have. But again, basis talent, basis, what they bring to the table, as long as it's based on that and not just because she's a woman.
And also a balance is important.
Yes.
Diversity is key.
Yes. Yeah. Because you can't just have a female point of view alone.
Exactly,
that's going to really wreak havoc.
Yeah.
No, but I think we need to
Only
also
we can say that.
identify that industry-wise, it's subjective as well.
For sure.
Yes,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yes.
As part of equality also has to be identifying that, you know what, women and men, there are certain things the
Yeah.
other can be a little better
Yeah.
at, and identifying that and saying that's okay.
Yeah.
That is proper equality.
Yeah.
Like you said, not
absolutely.
just saying, hey, no, we need so many.
Exactly. Female heads in the
I'm
company.
also not, this might be very unpopular, I'm also not a big fan of the quota of women on boards and so on.
Yes.
Because
yes.
you're ending up with people who are not quite there, just being pushed up on a quota.
Exactly.
I think our focus should be to take women plus middle management. We are
Yes.
losing far too many women in middle
Very
management.
true.
And prepare them for that, right?
Exactly. Build
prepare
them up,
them to be the
empower them.
directors
Yes.
and the CEOs and whatnot.
Yes.
Just don't add them just because you need a 50-50
Yeah.
or a 70-30.
All right. Last question. Any of you all can answer. If there's one thing that you want to tell this generation of marketers in terms of storytelling, what would that one thing be?
Be genuine or don't be genuine. For example, there was a particular soap brand, I remember. This girl comes wearing a particular color to the river and she washes her clothes. There's a certain music that comes. Later, that story has become real, that the girl comes wearing that dress and she's washing her clothes in the riverside with that music, and you know that that story is real. Fiction becomes a part of. Also, you can have the actual story. You know, this is where my journey began in 2016. We started going to Kurunagala and buying land. So some of it can be real, some of it doesn't need to be real, but it has to be real for you. I shouldn't be taking Shalin's motifs and putting in Juniper brand just because it looks really pretty. It actually looks really pretty.
It does. Yes.
Which some of them are using it, I see. But just because it should be his story. Zesta should be her story. I shouldn't take that and dupe. The same exact product can be told in different ways. That's what the content creators are doing nowadays, right? Influencers are doing that way. But just stick to your story and have your story and grow on it, whether it's fiction or real. Just be true to that. That's my advice.
My advice is that my camera? I'm going to talk
Don't
right on
copy
camera.
my motive.
Yeah.
Don't do that. My advice to Sri Lankan storytellers, Sri Lankan brand builders is leverage Sri Lanka. That's what we've done, and that's been the source of our success. The world is fighting for attention, and in order to get attention, you have to be unique, you have to be authentic, and you have to stand out. The world is yet to properly discover this beautiful island home of ours. We've got culture, we've got colors, we've got ingredients, we've got stories, and tons of them that we have not leveraged as brands, as human beings, as Sri Lankans. Use it. Use this ground we're standing on, because there are so many authentic stories to tell. So use the fact you're Sri Lankan. That's why I'm saying it right into the camera. That's your biggest advantage.
I'm into that.
Yes, we all are. I'm not going to say that. Just took us and just like, beach Lanka.
That's like the last thing.
Yeah,
ever.
I should just end it with that, like, my
Just
drop.
end it, mic drop.
Yeah. So for me, no matter how big or beautiful the story you tell, if you're not going to deliver it at the moment of truth, if all is going to go bare, then the story you're telling is really not going to matter. Because the negative story, the negative sentiment is going to spread far more wider and faster than the positive story you're going to tell. So you really need to have your ducks in a row. And you really need to make sure that you are actually working in the best interest of the consumer. The product you deliver is of absolute quality, and it's not going to really make them ill, or that's not how you do good business. And I'm very proud to be in a company that really believes in it. And I think I have license to also say it. Quality and the brand delivery needs to be right on point before you start doing any kind of storytelling, because the story you tell will really fall flat. Then build on it, because if you don't have that right, the story you tell is going to be so much more superfluous, and people are just going to be like, what I'll say is this: not having a consumer come to you is fine, but having a consumer come to you and leave really unsatisfied is going to be the worst thing that you can do with your brand. So tell a story, but make sure that story is told on a good base. That's it.
I think psychologically also people don't usually remember the good you do, but one bad thing is enough to kind of turn everything around. Yeah.
Yes.
And they'll trust you only once.
Yes.
Thank you so much. In today's world, even few emojis can tell a story. And how well do you tell your brand story in a way that you get consumers to emotionally invest in you, where they say, I need that brand, right? So even without a logical explanation sometimes, thank you speakers, you've been amazing, you've been wonderful, and I think the viewers would have gotten so much in terms of insights and little nuggets to take home and actually practice on. So thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you for having us.